So Joey Morrison is running for the spot of mayor in the city of Bozeman in Montana. We're going to be speaking with him today here on the Left Wing. My name is Desmond Price. I'm the host of the Independent Thought Podcast. I'm joined by my special co-host, Daniel Carlino, who is a current city council person of the city of Missoula in Montana. And we are joined by our candidate, Joey Morrison. Joey, how are you doing today? Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. We're in the liminal time of just, at times it feels like the election is a million years away, and it feels like it's suddenly right around the corner. And so every day feels a little different. But today I'm feeling good.
That's good. That's good. You know, I have quite a few questions for you about what it is like running in this race and what you plan on doing. And, we're going to be talking about housing. So, don't worry about that. We got some other questions we want to ask you as well. But before we get into any of those particular issues, I want to ask you a very general question. Obviously, you are challenging an incumbent mayor, someone who's been in office for over a decade now. And obviously, if you're challenging an incumbent who's been in office for that long, you have a different vision for the community than the incumbent does. And so I kind of wanted to start right there with you. Why do you want to run for mayor, and how is your vision for the community different than the current mayor's vision?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. There's sort of, I think we'll get into more of the thematics and specifics of what are the nuts and bolts, what are the policy pieces that we're wanting to run on and change. But the piece that motivates me the most, and the piece that I think speaks most to why running against an established incumbent, is sort of like the soul of our campaign, which is that the working people of Bozeman need their voices heard in City Hall and need to have their representative perspectives carried forth in making the decisions that affect their lives most directly. The sentiment when I am out knocking doors and I'm talking with folks in the community, and this has been the case for the last 2 years since I ran in 2021, it has been very clear that people do not like the direction that we're going in. And we have seen time and time again that actually the current commission and the current mayor is certainly part of this leadership, is actually very proud of the direction that Bozeman is going and is making very, very minor efforts to divert us from the direction that we're currently going. And the people of Bozeman are struggling. I'm struggling in this community, and I'm wanting to put forward a campaign that gets to sort of put a referendum to the people of Bozeman that says that answers the question, are we okay with the direction that we are going in? And overwhelmingly, the folks that I'm talking to are saying no.
Yeah, that's great. I feel like the world that we all imagine and that we'd want to see is so far from where we're at right now, and there's a lot of change to be had. And I'm just wondering if you think the mayor's office in Bozeman is a place that revolutionary change could come out of, and we could really get that sort of better world that we all envision.
Yeah, there's a little bit about how Bozeman's mayoral system works. Is really the mayor has very little additional authority than any other member of the commission. So we have just a 5-person commission, and the mayor, first as elected, they serve 2 years as the deputy mayor to sort of get their feet underneath them as far as how to be a commissioner. Then they spend the second 2 years of their term as the mayor. The mayor has some authorities over, what sorts of things go on the agenda. They have the ability to speak first and last in commission meetings and things like that. And also, obviously get to show up for different ceremonial purposes. But also get to be a leader at building relationships and being a convener. And those are the things that I'm most excited to bring energy around, is being a convener of great ideas, building relationships. And I think that's one of the values of not only, my background as a social worker, but also my background as an organizer, is that I recognize that relationships are the currency with which we get things done. And I'm a relationship builder as a natural skill. It's something that I just think about constantly. The relationships that I have with other people. What are the things that they want? What are the things that the county wants? What does our school board want? What are the public and private sectors here available in the city? What do they want, and what do they need to be brought to the table in a real negotiating way? And those are the things that I know that are essential for us to be really ambitious about tackling some of the most dire challenges that we're facing in Bozeman right now, like, folks experiencing homelessness, like our housing crisis, like our growing water needs that are going to be running up against just the fundamental limit of how much water we can get into this valley. Those types of things need leadership from City Hall, and we're not seeing that right now. So many people are really distraught and disturbed and concerned about the direction we're going. There's nowhere to funnel any of that frustration. The city is not leading community dialogues or engaging the community in a meaningful way to let people feel satisfied and let people feel heard. And instead, they're relegated to grumpy letters to the editor and angry posts on Nextdoor. And that's just not a way for us to be able to move forward in a meaningful way.
No, that makes total sense. Whenever I've lived in Montana for a long time now, and, I've lived in Missoula for over a decade, but I've had friends who live in Bozeman. I've made plenty of trips to Bozeman over the years. And it seems as though these two cities have a really, powerful connection, with the sense that it's becoming more and more like unaffordable to stay in these communities, the communities that we love. And that's the number one question that people ask me whenever, like I'm talking to them, about what's going on in their community. They're like, hey, like, what is going on with the housing crisis? Like, why are things just getting more expensive? Why is it getting more unaffordable to live here? Like, why is nothing changing? And, like I was saying before, I don't want to bury the lead here. This is the number one issue for everybody. And so I kind of just want to ask you right from the top here, what is your specific plan to help Bozeman be more affordable, to allow people to stay in this community to which they love, and to not have to worry all the time about like whether or not, like, if I lose this place that I'm in, that I'm going to have to leave this community, altogether?
Yeah, that is overwhelmingly what we run into when we're talking to folks in the community. Every other door we talk to, if it's not housing is their first issue, it's their second. And it's really nuanced. I mean, there's sort of like multiple chunks of the housing problem that we're experiencing here in Bozeman. There are folks that are seniors that they've been forced into a position of the only way that they can meaningfully retire is to sell their home and leave Bozeman, a place that maybe they've lived for 40 or 50 or 60 or 70 years, or they might be the third or fourth generation that's living in the house that they're in. And they wouldn't be able to sustain it on a fixed income. So then their only plan is to sell it and leave. So that we're losing the ability for seniors to be able to age in place. We have folks that are getting pushed out of their housing and straight onto the street, which is, they're obviously deeply connected, but it's like it requires separate mechanisms to be able to address those in a meaningful way for our folks that are getting evicted or pushed out or priced out and still maintain jobs and employment in the community, but end up living on the street instead. And then we have a whole block of people that are trying to put down roots, that are young families that are unable to purchase. All the while, much of our inventory gets purchased as a speculative home purchase from someone out of state.
Right.
A lot of these pieces are, at the end of the day, to be able to build housing and procure housing that we can deed restrict and we can lock in place, we need to bring people to the negotiating table and bring collaborators in. This can look like a lot of different things. Some of the most powerful tools that we have are LIHTC or low-income housing tax credits to be able to actually subsidize the cost of the creation of those units. But there's also, and actually our city commission is going to be doing a short presentation on some of these tonight, here in just a couple hours, kind of giving an update on where these are at. So my answer, there might be a more promising future depending on how that presentation goes.
Yeah.
But there are certainly lenders in this community who are recognizing that just lending to developers that want to build vacation rentals is destroying our city. And there are absolutely lenders that have a recognition that, wow, I will absolutely I'll take a little bit less of a profit to invest in housing that actually positively impacts our community. And there are lenders that have been working on these things, and many of them have called them things like housing impact funds. But a lot of these are the ways in which the city can be gaining and garnering capital to be able to either procure land or create subsidies or just sweeten the deal for a developer to build the housing that we actually need. So that's like one chunk, is going out, getting the money, building the inventory that we need for the people who live here, prioritizing the people who live and work in this community and make it run. The other part is the city needs to start saying no to luxury developments. We are seeing just time and time again where the city is effectively operating as as a glorified rubber stamp for luxury apartment complexes that go largely unlived in by any locals. Nobody can afford them. And they largely become short-term rentals or vacation rentals in various forms, or go unoccupied altogether. I had heard a rumor recently that somebody bought a $1 million apartment for the parking spot so that their Porsche didn't have to sit outside. and I think those speak to the immense growing gap between the people who are struggling to make ends meet, but are actually the people who make this community run, the teachers, the nurses that are struggling every day with the question of whether they should stay, with the folks that are coming in with an extraordinarily large amount of means and get to basically price the rest of us out without much consent. So those are pieces that the commission has a handle on being able to say no to prioritize inventory for locals. The other piece is, going out and getting the money, because we know that's the main limiting factor that we have for places like Bozeman. I know Missoula has some different options as far as like land that is held by the city. It's just not something that we have at the moment. The other piece that I just really want to talk about, because it's really on a lot of people's minds right now, is the way the city of Bozeman is tackling folks experiencing homelessness. Right now, there is talks of this fairly draconian ordinance that the commission will be voting on actually a week from today, that will effectively fine, as it's currently written, is proposing to fine folks experiencing homelessness that are sleeping on the street $100 per day if they are unable to move their vehicle or their dwelling every 5 days, effectively making it cost $36,500 a year to be homeless in the city of Bozeman. This does not get us any closer to getting those folks back on their feet. It doesn't make them any safer. It's putting a really deeply undue burden on the people who are already struggling most in our community. And the city manager has already acknowledged this, that they estimate, and I think this is conservative, that somewhere around 80% are working full or more than full time. And so quite literally our streets have become our workforce housing. And this idea that we just need to penalize those people because of aesthetic concerns is not leadership that I would want coming from the city commission that represents me, and it will not be the leadership that we see when I'm on the commission.
Oh, geez. Yeah, we've got similar situation going on in Missoula right now, with the rise of people who are experiencing homelessness. The city, wants to put more and more resources towards moving people from one camp to the next spot, like when it's hundreds of thousands of dollars lost that could have gone towards, helping them get a decent place to stay at night. And it's just a pivotal time, like across the country with homelessness rising. Like, are we going to go towards more police and security and punitive measures, or are we going to go towards like the more humane route? And I appreciate you bringing this up. And I guess the next question was just, it seems like there's like a lot of people in Bozeman who are volunteering and helping out with your campaign, and it feels like there's a good grassroots momentum of people that just want to spend some time trying to make Bozeman a better place through this electoral process. And I'm just curious, why do you think so many people are getting involved and wanting to volunteer on a campaign like this?
Yeah, I think one, at the end of the day, we're good organizers. We're good at identifying folks and giving them roles and making them feel like they have stake and autonomy and power in this campaign and feel bought in. But also there's a different sense of desperation in folks for needing change, needing to feel some level of hope. I think actually my average donation is one of the things to look to. In my race in 2021, my average donation was like $23 to $24. This time it's nearly $100, and it's from largely the same people. There are folks that have donated the max amount to my campaign who are basically living paycheck to paycheck, and actually saw investing that money into my campaign was a return on, like, hoping to get a return on their own investment, that is something that actually will help them in the long run. Yeah. And certainly that puts some pep in my step, but it also like really gives a hefty feeling of responsibility of there are folks that feel this crisis in the same way that I do, that are out knocking doors and talking to people in their community. And one thing that's been really, really exciting and really just one of the most beautiful parts of this is going out to a canvas, and there are volunteers there who I've never met before. and they've self-organized and they've come out and they've said, I want to do this every single week until November 7th. And there's it's hard to go right to the bed a few hours later after a canvas like that. Like those just kind of wake me up in a really special way.
That's great.
Yeah, I mean, it seems as though people are just feeling the burden, just all around squeeze of having to live in these communities. And obviously housing is the number one issue, and we've talked about that. And obviously it also like stems into people becoming unhoused, and that is, I just want to say, just personally, the people who are responsible for that measure, who want to essentially fine people $100 every 5 days, shameful, absolutely shameful. Like I cannot believe that I actually heard that is legitimately being up for debate in our state. That's absolutely shameful. But alongside of housing, there are some other issues affecting your community. I know that, particularly you had mentioned to me in the past that, there are folks in your community who are struggling with childcare, for instance. I think this is also another burning of the housing, issue. People have to spend so much money just to live in a dwelling that, they have to probably work more than they would want to. And then that leads to higher childcare costs than probably they would otherwise have to take on. What is your plan to address that piece specifically for the people of Bozeman?
Yeah, childcare. It's interesting. In 2021, we would hear childcare almost interchangeably with housing. I think it has settled down for folks realizing that for so many of like the cost of our groceries, the cost of childcare, the cost of school, they're still in so many ways entrenched in the cost of housing. That housing is what has squeezed everything else to feel more unmanageable. But no doubt childcare is an exorbitant fee for young families. I know when I was sitting on a city board last year, there was a presentation where folks were coming in and talking about programs that some other municipalities of comparable size have started to do, which is basically creating a scholarship fund to either cut checks to young families that are struggling to pay for childcare. And we have some great organizations here in town that have really amazing after school and childcare programs, like Childcare Connections and Kids Link and things like that are run by local nonprofits. The other piece would be the other part of those scholarships that some municipalities have done that I'd love to explore more is cutting checks on an annual basis to organizations that have the space to provide childcare within their own facilities. So whether the hospital has has like a few rooms that could be used for childcare for their employees, or same with for public schools and things like that. I think Bozeman could explore some of those things. I think we would run into not that many businesses are large enough, or not that many organizations are large enough to potentially utilize something like that. But we have some large organizations and large nonprofits that absolutely have young families where one person often has to leave employment to take care of their children and things like that. And the ability to explore options like that for things like HRDC or for our hospital or for the city and county employees and things like that is absolutely something that we'd want to look into.
That's great. Yeah, next question is more about healthcare, which might not come up often at the local level, but there are some possibilities of ways to help. And one thing is, I'm curious: is Bozeman's ambulance service currently privatized? And it sounds like yes.
Oh yeah, it is.
Yeah, and what do you think about trying to maybe this would be a Bozeman and Gallatin County or multiple government ordeal, but what do you think about trying to work towards a public ambulance service in the future?
Yeah, I think that is absolutely a no-brainer for the direction that we need to head in. It's clear privatized emergency medical response services there's a risk to them anywhere in the country if they do not have a robust contract with the municipality that they can pull out at effectively any time. And that is the current standing contract that we have with AMR. Is that if a few weeks from now they decided the juice wasn't worth the squeeze, they could just pack right up and move out, and we would be stuck. It would effectively put all of that burden onto our volunteer firefighters to respond to emergencies, to medical emergencies. It just feels like and I don't know exactly at the moment where the county is at on these conversations. But this is something that I've started to hear about recently. Actually came from canvassing a volunteer firefighter who raised this concern to me several months ago.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you know, I'm sorry,
go
go ahead.
ahead. Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, the cost of an ambulance ride is so expensive, and
Oh my God.
yeah, we've got like the police and fire and other emergency responses. So I don't know. It would be nice to you know live in a world where people aren't worried about the cost of their ambulance ride, and just
Yeah.
the sole purpose is just get people help as fast as possible.
Yeah.
I've definitely come across people in the past who said that they didn't want someone to call an ambulance for them because they were worried about the bill.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've heard like a comparison. This was a back of an envelope calculation by this person I was meeting with, that it's like $2,500 ish if there's no treatment to get taken from your house to the hospital via AMR. And it's like it could be like $250 if you go with a volunteer firefighter. And it's just like, yeah, those are obviously very different emergency level expenses for folks to have to stomach. And it's clear that the people of Bozeman, the people of probably much of Montana, would like to see that changed.
Yeah.
You know, alongside of, obviously the issues about, like healthcare, childcare, housing, people in our age demographic, particularly millennials, Gen Z, people really are focused on climate change. Now, this is something that you normally don't talk about at the local level. This is a national thing, a state thing. Obviously, these are issues we don't normally hear at a city government level. But I know that, somebody, like yourself, Joe, you were part of the Sunrise Movement. Am I correct in that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I just want to know, particularly if you were to take office, what can be done at the city level to address climate change, and what would you plan to do, I guess, like with the powers that you do have?
Yeah. Yeah, that is a question that I thought we were going to be grappling with a lot more regularly in this campaign. And I'm hoping, we're getting into forum season, so I'm hoping it'll start to come up more often. I feel like some of the rhetoric that still gets discussed, especially from other candidates in this race or from the city at the moment, is our climate action plan still has things like considerations of, parts per million and consumer choices, as if those are the main contributors to climate change. The things that I would be most excited to start getting really pragmatic about is, one, the creation of a department within the city that is specifically tasked with assessing and evaluating our climate mitigation needs, and staffing it with people who will go and win grants so that we can actually put money behind these efforts. There are millions of dollars in small town grants that the EPA dishes out every year. It's just money sitting on the table. We absolutely need to be winning that money so that we can be building in a sustainable way. The other piece is that we will run out of water in this valley. There is a finite point, and it's been measured multiple times. It's a gray number at the moment as far as how many years we have before our housing and the people occupying this valley will overlap the amount of water that we have. We need every single plan and every single infrastructure proposal, every single development that goes into this town to have that plan in mind, that understanding of the finite resource that we have, that we just quite literally will run out of water if we do not build in a smart way. And we're not at the moment. Other pieces are just being really mindful about our conservation efforts that we have already in place. The city has a climate action plan that needs to be a lot more aggressive in terms of making sure, right now it's still in our city code that developments have to have healthy green vegetative cover or green grass lawns. And we know that those are not utilized. We know that that's sort of an antiquated relic. We know that they're really water consumptive. They don't meet our water goals. We don't need them. Little pieces like that will move the needle, but we also just know we really need to make sure that we're protecting and prioritizing our green spaces that we have in this community. Bozeman feels like a mountain town because it is one, and we have a remarkable amount of green spaces that people have access to, but we need to make sure that everybody can continue using these. And some of those will be, bolstering our public transportation infrastructure, that now we're sort of in a whole new world of, exceeding 50,000 people. We now have a new distinction. So the public transportation potential is new and exciting. But beyond that, the things that keep me up at night are when I'm hearing our elected officials talk about prevention, like climate change isn't already here. Like we can recycle and we can plastic bag ban our way into stopping climate change from getting here. All the while we had, a once in a century flood just last year that displaced, thousands of our neighbors just the next town over. And I actually served as a rapid response case manager to make sure people got life-saving checks and the money that they needed to take care of themselves during that crisis. But then we just moved right on from it.
Yeah.
There's no robust plans for, wow, do we need to do any like preemptive riverbank stabilization? What is the relationship between the city and the county and our local Forest Service to assess what sort of risk are we at? And there are maps all across Montana that are diagnosing like which parts of Montana are higher risk for which types of disasters. But there's not really a coordinated effort for what we do. And this came from a conversation I had with folks in FEMA and COAD that said, in FEMA, Federal Emergency something Administration, COAD is Community Organizations Active in Disasters, that they didn't have like a robust plan with municipalities for like, what do we do when Glasgow, Montana gets flooded and it displaces everybody who lives there? Then those people are likely going to go to communities like Billings and Bozeman and Missoula and be internally displaced within the state of Montana. Yeah. And I think it's really short-sighted to still think that we're not going to experience something like that. Like it really feels like an inevitability with the ways in which climate-induced disasters are ramping up every year in this state, that within the next 10 years we're going to see a disaster of that scale.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so much to talk about in that section. So you get elected, you've got about 2 months before you start as mayor. What's the first thing you're going to do as mayor?
Yeah, so it's still a weird piece of like, I'll actually move in as deputy mayor. So I won't have the full reins of mayor. But that's part of what's opportunistic right now is I'm pretty excited about serving as deputy mayor under the current of who will be mayor in January, which is the current deputy mayor, Terry Cunningham. I feel really excited to see to work with him and see some of his processes and how the commission operates under his leadership. I know things that are top of my mind for things that we want to try to talk about really early are things like what types of protections can we try to get in place really early for renters in a more aggressive way, like a tenant's bill of rights and things like that. But the pieces that are longer vision or have a longer standing impact would be assessing and rewriting our city charter and appointing a government research commission to decide whether and how we want to rewrite our charter.
Great.
So, I really appreciate you coming on the show today, Joey. You are going to be the first interview that we have here on the new channel, someone who's running for office. We appreciate you coming in here and talking to us about all these issues facing Bozeman. And honestly, they're not just Bozeman issues. These are Montana issues. Some of these are national issues. We're talking about some of these housing particulars. But to your race, obviously you have an election coming up in November. Mm-hmm. And I just want to know, as you are going door to door and you are talking to people in Bozeman, what is your pitch to those who, are just not sure if your campaign is correct for them? And also at the same time, to those out there who are feeling pretty apathetic, or feeling like as though they don't even know if voting matters, if they don't know if this means anything, if they don't even know if, any of their opinions are actually going to have any effect on anything happening in the community. You know who I'm talking about. Yeah. There's so much voter apathy out there. Yeah. How do you talk to those people, and how do you convince them that this campaign is actually going to tangibly improve the lives of the people of Bozeman?
Yeah, that's great. I think one of the pieces that sticks with people the most and impresses them is that we're running by far the most aggressive field operation that Bozeman has ever seen in any municipal election. And there's part of that is that's a winning strategy, right? People like to be talked to at their doors. That is a Montana value that I've had all my life. We talk to our neighbors, we connect with one another. But it also gives us the momentum and the cover to be really ambitious in the spring. It makes it easier to have a really big and ambitious 100 days after taking office. It gives us the grounds to have a really ambitious budget season because we've already been engaging the community. And that is so much of what people feel is they just feel disconnected. They feel like their voices are not heard. They feel constantly disturbed by some of the things that the city is doing. And some of them are things that the city is doing without the guidance of the commission. They're just the nuts and bolts of how a city needs to run. But some of them are guided decisions that the commission is doing that the people do not feel is representing what they want to see happen in Bozeman. And being able to talk with folks and say, hey, are you okay with the direction Bozeman is going in? And they say no. And then we say, okay, that's why I'm running. Let's talk about what we need to get to the Bozeman that we all belong and we feel safe in. I would say those are the way in which we're running the campaign probably speaks to people more than individual issues. Like certainly everybody is going to say housing is really challenging, sustainability is really challenging. Here are things we need to do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The commission's been failing. Commission can do more. But it is about how we're running in this campaign that I think speaks to people in a different way than just being able to say, you know, here's XYZ plan, here's something like that. And I think those are the pieces that are waking up people. There are people on my campaign who are giving 15 to 20 hours a week who've never voted in a municipal election in their life. And those are the kinds of things that one, we know starts to empower, you know, a younger generation to become the dominant voting bloc that determines how elections get panned out. But I think those are some of the biggest pieces of just I guess some people like to hear that I'm a social worker. For some people that goes a long way, having a social worker background or being a community organizer. But I think a lot of it is we need new young energy. We need people who are willing to engage with the community. We need people who are willing to talk with people they disagree with. And that's my bread and butter.
Well, hey, you know, we really appreciate you coming on the show today and talking to us about your campaign and everything that you want to do for the city of Bozeman. For those who want to know more about your campaign, where can they find you at online?
Yeah, all of our socials are all Joey for Bozeman or Morrison for Bozeman. People can come to our website. That's probably the best way to connect to absolutely everything else, which is morrisonforbozeman.com. From there, I mean, you'll see the people that have endorsed me. You'll see all the letters to the editor that are about my campaign, and you'll also see there's some short form pieces of just like, here's some bullet points for the people who just want bullet points, and then there's like a few like 1,100 word longer form pieces on what are some of the things we want to see happen for the people who like to get into the weeds a bit more.
All right. Well, for those who are interested, those links will be in the episode description. So go ahead and check that out now, and you will see those links. I want to thank our special co-host, Daniel Carlino, current Missoula City Council person, for being on the show with me today, and our candidate, Joey Morrison. For those who are, you know, in the Bozeman community, this is final question here. When does early voting start?
Yeah, ballots will go out on October 20th. That's when they get mailed out. You might get them the next day, might get them that following Monday. I believe I need to get an exact date on when they can start getting turned in, but I know we're really encouraging folks to get registered in advance because I know that it's been confusing the last few years, the changes around when same day registration ends and things like that. But ballots are coming out. You should have your ballot by like the 23rd or 24th of October.
Perfect. Everyone, vote early. Make sure you vote. Thanks for checking out this episode. Make sure you check out more about Joey's campaign, and we will see you in the next episode.